Yes, hello and welcome everybody. It's Chris here from the Ministry of Dice, and I'm back again today with another one of my video presentation whatchamacallums. And as you can see on the screen there, in today's video, what I'm going to be talking about, probably my most favourite subject in Dice Masters of all time. That's right, I'm going to be talking about Dice Masters Control. What I have for you today is I've broken down control into three categories, styles, philosophies. I'm not really sure what label to put on it there, but three styles of control that you'll see in the game of Dice Masters, and talking a little bit about kind of what that style involves and how it influences the way you build your team, what it's trying to achieve, and how it would influence gameplay. And then I've got a few cards just to kind of throw up as examples there to illustrate my points. And hopefully by the end of this video, if you're not a control player, you'll have a little bit of a better understanding of how a control player builds their team and uses these ideas. If you are a control player, then maybe there's one or two cards in there you've gone, ooh, I like the look of that one, I'll give that one a go kind of thing. This is by no means, before I get started, I should say, this is by no means an exhaustive list of control cards and control combos. These are just a handful of cards I'm using to demonstrate the explanations that I'm putting out there. So if you're a long-standing player and you're watching this and you've got some favourite control cards and some control combos, then please do head to the comments below and add them in, so if there's any new players floating around, they can see those too. Also, before I get into the body of the video, if you have enjoyed what you've watched today, then please do take the time to give us a like and a subscribe. You are absolutely the best community in the world. We love having you as viewers, and we really love to have you on board as regular visitors of our YouTube content. So please take the time to do that. But without further ado, I'm going to move on and start talking a little bit about Dice Masters Control. So, the first control style philosophy thing that I want to share with you today is disincentive and tax. A really interesting style of control, and one that I enjoy playing particularly. The idea here is that you roll stuff into your team and get it out in the field that is going to place your opponent in a difficult decision-making moment. It doesn't prevent them from doing what they're trying to do. It's not there to stop things from happening, but it is there to give them that tough decision to decide whether they want to do that thing because you've rolled in some sort of punitive measure, some disincentive that is going to benefit you should they do the activity that they're about to do. And it mostly boils down to, do you want to field that thing? Do you want to pay for that thing in that way? Do you want to attack? You know, these types of disincentive control that makes your opponent think, oh, do I want to do that? Do I want to take that hit or give you that benefit as a result of doing that? I'm not so sure, kind of thing. It's a really interesting type of control because while it does have that element of decision making rolled into it, it doesn't stop your opponent from doing things. It is just a disincentive. And you have to make sure that you're in a position with your team and with your gameplay that you're able to weather that decision if they choose to go ahead despite the disincentive, despite the punitive tax that you've attached to it. Let me give you a couple of examples there. So here's Jinzo, the OG control card from Yu-Gi-Oh! Trap Destroyer, it's the rare, and his game text reads, while this monster is active, your opponent must pay 2 life to use an action die or global ability. So, beautiful control card there, because not only is it a disincentive in the sense of, you know, I'm going to benefit from you using that action die or using that global ability, but it also contributes towards your win condition because it's essentially knocking 10% of your opponent's life total off, you know. And because it's pay life as well rather than take damage, it's, you know, very difficult to counter. However, with Jinzo in the field, you have to accept the fact that your opponent may still choose to pay the 2 life to do the action, to use the global ability. So you have to be in a position to be able to weather whatever the results of that is that they're about to do. However, it is going to give your opponent that moment's pause to say, oh, 2 life, that's soon going to start adding up. I'm 3 turns in, I've used PXG already 10 lives worth of times, you know, and it just creates that situation where they've got to reconsider whether the tools they brought to use to make their team successful are going to be worth it in the end. As time went on, there's been other examples. Here's Wasp, Founding Avenger from the Age of Ultron. She does a ping of damage when opponents use a global ability. There's a newer version of this Wasp that does it with action dice that was in the Avengers Infinity campaign box. I think she's called Love and Loss or Life and Loss. So same theory, just targeting actions instead of globals. So these are punitive measures that target your opponent's life total and make them consider whether they want to take these actions when it's going to give them a chip of damage or make them lose life. However, disincentive and tax is not always just about hitting their life total. It may provide other benefits to you that your opponent wants to think twice about. Here's an example here from back in the day in AVX, Beast Mutate number 666. When Beast blocks, draw 1 die and place it in your prep area. And if he's on his burst phase, it says instead draw 2 dice, place 1 in your prep area and the other in your use pile. So while it's not an aggressive type of control that's going to contribute to you winning the game in the sense of taking your opponent's life total down, it is a type of control that's still going to make them think twice. Do I want to attack right now? They're going to block with that beast. That's going to give them a prep. Oh, that beast's on level 1. Bit of churn as well. It's going to really help them out with their bag management, their bag control, and their spending power next turn. So is now the right time to attack? Do I want to be firing things over the field, or do I want to think twice while that beast is out there? And what's lovely about that is that all of these give you that sort of that strategic chess element of the game, because you're popping stuff out that is putting your opponent in a position where they're going to have to try and find counterplays of their own to get around this stuff. Here's another example I've got on the list, the Great Drunkard. Very similar in terms of the beast, but also evidence of disincentive and tax control not necessarily being all about dealing damage. So the Great Drunkard here, built for defense, is a trap. It triggers when your opponent uses a global ability on your turn, and it gets you a 6/6 Great Drunkard token. So it's like, yeah, sure, if you field that sidekick with your Professor X No More Magnus in my turn, fill your boots. But if you do, you're giving me a 6/6 Great Drunkard character, So it's another disincentive. They have to sit there and think, oh man, do I really need this sidekick for what I'm trying to do? Or do I really need to prep that dice with Xanathar Global? Or do I really need to KO that thing with Nihilor in my opponent's turn? Because if I do, I'm going to give them a Great Drunkard token. So not all disincentive is about hitting the life total. It's about setting you for success in other ways. But you know what? If your opponent doesn't choose to trigger it, well, that action die is going to sit continuously as a trap in your field until the moment that they do. So it's just going to affect them for the rest of the game. Here's another example. We've got Pip the Troll, Prince Gofern from the Infinity Gauntlet set. Very similar to Oracle, Master Investigator from back in the day in World's Finest. He says, while Pip the Troll is active, your opponents pay 1 more to use each global ability. So again, another example where disincentive, where that tax isn't necessarily about hitting their life counter, but is about affecting their spending power and their spending ability. Oh, you can use that global by all means, but you're going to have to pay 1 more for it. I'm taxing you an extra for it, and that may affect your ability to afford fielding costs this turn. It'll affect your ability to buy a dice that you were planning on buying to build on your win condition strategy. Is going to make it more difficult for you to save energy to use globals in my turn, etc, etc. So disincentive and tax, really interesting way of playing. It really creates that chess game, like I said before, where you have to then start thinking about how you counterplay around these, or have control of your own to counter their control. So it really brings the mid game and the late game into play. It really takes the wind out the sails of aggro a lot of the times, and but the small print there is that you have to still be willing to allow your opponent to do. It's not preventative. You have to allow them to do the thing that they're going to do. They may still make the decision to pay the tax, but the tax is still obviously going to benefit you in the long term. So I really love this style of play. I think it's really interesting, especially when you've got cheap cost stuff like the Great Drunkard there, that's just a 3-cost trap die to drop in the field and say, yeah, you know what, you want to use the collector to make a sidekick? By all means do. But I'm going to have a 6/6 Great Drunkard token, So yeah, really love that, and it's just a great way of playing the game where everybody still has options, but it's creating that difficult decision-making process for your opponent. Right, next one on the list. Let's have a look at what I've got here. Yes, oppression and counterplay. So whereas disincentive and tax is just about making them pay a punitive measure for doing stuff, oppression and counterplay is all about prevention. This is control where you say, stop, you cannot do that. I'm going to lock you down and not allow that thing to happen at all. Now, this is probably the most frustrating of control types to play against, because it is so oppressive and it is about locking stuff out and not only affecting decision making, but taking the decision out of the opponent's hands altogether. Sometimes, even I as a control player find oppression and counterplay related control a bit frustrating and a little overpowered sometimes, or imbalanced, but that's a conversation for another day. So you're loading up your team, you're popping stuff on your team that is designed to stop your opponent from being able to do things, taking choices off the table altogether. That is no longer an option. I have locked it out. Let me give you some examples. Here's a favourite of mine, Wonder Woman Reflections, a 5-cost mask. She says, while Wonder Woman is active, when fielded and when attacks abilities are ignored. So just a nice big bit of muscle to drop in the field. Look at those defense numbers, 3, 5, 7, to drop in the field and cut off when fielded and when attacks abilities, which a large number of win conditions and a large number of utility pieces centre around. When fielded takes out loads of great stuff, and when attacks takes out loads of great stuff. It's a control piece you have to be careful with. Your own win condition can't be when attacks and when fielded, because she is a blanket effect that will impact you as well as your opponent, so you aren't able to use when fielded and when attacks abilities too. But a really strong piece of control in the golden context, and as a 5-cost mask, there's loads of ways to get her cheaper as well. There's a Steve Trevor combo where you can KO him and buy her dirt cheap and prepper. Asuka's now in the scene with WWE, who discounts mask characters, so it's also a way of getting some really, really cheap oppressive control out in the field. Loads more. Here's Drax from the Infinity Gauntlet. He's all about targeting cards and not allowing purchase or fielding of those cards. He's awesome because he can be used for actions and characters. Obviously, in terms of preventing purchases for actions, but purchases and fielding for characters. Nice and cheap, 3-cost. You can buy him in the first turn. You got Shriek as well, same sort of thing, targeting cards, blanking them. This is an example of where I'm not too keen. I think this is control of oppression that goes a little bit of a bridge too far, because anything you can buy in the first turn that entirely locks out your opponent's strategy before they've even had an opportunity to buy a piece of it, I think is a little bit too much. But in a world where there's so much cheap aggro win conditions, I suppose cheap control is the counterpoint to that. But anyway, there you go. So your blankers, you got your new version of Shriek here with Typhoid Mary, red rubber boots in the Infinity Gauntlet. Does the same thing. She's slightly more expensive though. So blanking cards, targeting stuff, and saying nope, can't do that. I'm taking away that game text. By all means, buy that dice and put it in the field, but it's just a lump of plastic now. That kind of thing. We've also got stuff like Scarlet Witch, super popular, oppressive sort of counter action control, where you're creating this 50-50 shot situation on their actions. Or is it 50-50 shot? I'm not an odds guy, but because there might be an opportunity to reroll. Anyway, but certainly a very popular piece of action control there. So you're looking over the table, you're going, "Ooh, there's lots of action stuff going on there. I'll buy my Scarlet Witch and drop her in the field." Or we've got Static Field, just an example where oppressive counterplay in the control sphere isn't just always about buying dice and putting them in the field, but there's globals, kind of reactive globals that you can call upon. Another great example I can think of on the top of my head is Wallop. As a kind of counterplay global that says nope, can't do that, kind of thing. And then this next one here, I think there it is, Kang time duplicates. Again, another one saying, oh, no, you thought you were doing me 7 damage, but actually you're doing 4. So this kind of oppressive counterplay stuff that sort of takes the wind out of the sails of your opponent. And finally, I've got Eddie Guerrero here, Ice Steel, a classic example of, you saved energy back for some globals, have you? Right, well, get me Eddie Guerrero out, I'll attack, clear all that energy down. You cannot use those globals. Just really oppressive counterplay that says if you're saving energy back to use globals, I suppose like the aforementioned Kang and Wallop and Static Field, then Eddie Guerrero is going to take that out the picture. So a very frustrating type of control to play against. It's difficult to build win conditions in when you build. I've built a number of oppressive teams of this nature where I've got loads of great control and I can really slow my opponent down and prevent them from doing lots of stuff, but it's tough to roll in win conditions that support it then to actually make it a winning team. But certainly something that to be considered. You see a lot of this kind of oppressive control, sort of a little dabble of it into teams that aren't necessarily control-centered teams, but you'll see a Shriek or or we'll be seeing a Drax or a Scarlet Witch thrown on just for that added little element of protection, because it's very generic oppression. It doesn't matter what type of card I'm looking at that I don't like the look at on the other side of the table, a Drax or a Shriek will take care of it. Or, I'm using lots of basic actions, I don't want my opponent to use them, so I'm dropping a Scarlet Witch in there. So you see a lot of people sort of dabbling in, putting little sprinkles of this sort of oppressive control just to give them a bit of support. And I think that's one of the reasons why I have a problem sometimes with cards like Drakenshriek, is that they're so generic. They take that chess out of the game, and it's just like, bang, put my Shriek in the field, there you go. Now you've got to fanny about trying to sort her out so you can get on with your own stuff while I'm merrily slapping you in the face with this over here. But in any case, conversation for another day, he says, even though he just rambled on about it. Let's move on to my third and final category of control. And this is a really interesting one. This is combat and board control, which I suppose you could argue rolls in elements of the other two. But the reason I've kind of carved it off and separated it is because I think there's something about removal and killing things, you know, to support your combat strategy. And it's all about keeping your opponent's field low so that they haven't got the tools in their toolbox to use themselves because their dice aren't staying around, or to keep their board low so that your combat shenanigans can have more of an impact, more of an effect. So yeah, I would qualify this one as kind of like combat control. It's all about killing things so they can't block. It's all about shenanigans that happen when you attack. It's all about keeping your opponent's board low so they can't do as much themselves as you can do. So there is that element of, I suppose, oppressive control in there, especially with apocalyptic kind of blanket large area of effect murder moves, but I've sort of carved it off separately because you tend to find sort of teams that are built around combat damage and built around combat attack, whereas the other two sort of have more kind of direct damage or shenanigans styles. Maneuvers are a bit different. I don't know. Again, if you don't agree, then please do drop a comment in the comments below and we'll have a chat about it. But here's some examples to bring that to life. Here's Firestorm, host of the Matrix. I've had a merry old time facing this one. Ben Said Scott used to play this against me all the time. And it reads, when Firestorm attacks, deal 1 damage to target character die for each other character die in your field zone. So get a couple of Firestorms out along with your own win condition, attack with them all, clear some blockers down, remove some stuff that's getting in your way so that you can drive your damage through. Magic Missile, another great example. I feel like this is a very risky basic action to use sometimes because not only have you got the game text itself, which deals 2 damage to target character die or player, but you've got the global there where you can ping for 1 and take stuff out of the field. So a really useful bit of kind of board control there if you want to force your opponent to block with their more substantial, more valuable characters. You know, oh, you got some sidekicks to do some chump blocking with. No, you haven't. Ping, 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 off they go. You know, so shooting sidekicks off to thin down the field so that your opponent's left either with nothing, or if they have got something more substantial, forced to block with it or take the damage. Here's another example of that, Confront the Mighty. I love this one. This is a basic action that turns weenies into beast killers, you know. So it says target character die you control has attack equal to the defense of target opposing character die. Those 2 character dice deal damage to each other equal to their attack. So again, really nice way of, I've got this big thing here, I want to fire it down through the field, but they've also got a big thing that they're camping on, that they're planning on blocking with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Confront the Mighty, drop it onto this sidekick here. My sidekick now becomes strong enough to kill their big blocker, and I can drive my damage through with mine, you know. But of course, that could also double up as other control, because you can use it to remove things you don't like them having. But you get the idea. And then I've got here Rachel Summers. Here's an example of that kind of apocalyptic board clear. When Rachel Summers is active, if another X-Men character dies, KO'd, KO all of the characters. So this is really popular in the meta at the moment. Double her up with Hope, Pluripotent Echopraxia that can copy her. You load up on an X-Men or 2, KO one of them using Nihilor in your opponent's go, clears the field, and then you're ready to field a load of stuff and walk over to an empty field, dealing combat damage the following turn. But it can also be used as a very effective piece of board control there, because as you're firing it off, you're preventing your opponent from doing stuff in their turn as well. So just that kind of large area of effect, combat and board control shenanigans that are saying, I'm going to have more dice than you that can do more things, and so I'm taking your dice out of the picture and supporting my win condition by making sure you've got a low board, and I can drive more combat damage through, can remove more stuff than you, so you haven't got any things to play with, and I have. Can be very oppressive sometimes again, but a really excellent and really interesting way of playing control. Right, well, there we go. Quick whistle stop talk. Feel like I've spoken really fast, but I've still managed to get around 20 minutes there. That concludes my Dice Masters Control video. Again, if you enjoyed this, then please do give us a like and a subscribe. I'd love to get into conversation with you guys, so if you've got any thoughts on Control, or you think there's a great Control combo that you want to bring up and mention in the comments and have a chat about and share with new players who may not be very familiar with this, then please do. Are there other types of Control styles? Are the lines more blurred? Is it less simple than I've made it out to be? Are some of the oppressive control cards too oppressive? And are your Draxes and your Shrieks and your Typhoid Marys of the world a bit ridiculous? And should they be taken out of the game? Let me know too. On the right hand side of the screen now, you'll have a couple of videos that the YouTube computer thinks that you might enjoy. So if you've got some more time, please do check one of those out. But in the meantime, I'll catch you on a video, on a podcast, or on a written blog post somewhere soon. Okay, ta-ra now folks, bye.